Welcome, my friends. Everybody, welcome. Hi, this is Scott Ott with Bill Whittle Now, and I am paraphrasing not something that Bill and I are saying to you, but something that Enrique Peña Nieto, the president of Mexico, said to the Hondurans who are caravanning on their way through Mexico on their way to the United States. And on Friday, as we record this, this was Friday last week, the president of Mexico basically said to the caravan that's moving through his country, "You're at home." Literally, you're at home. Stop here, take refuge. We will provide food. We will provide housing. We will find you jobs. We will provide you health care. And in fact, at some point over the last several weeks, some 1,700 Hondurans have sought asylum in Mexico, escaping, as they say, from the terrible political situation in Honduras, which has gotten even worse in recent days. However, the caravan, Bill, apparently voted no, and said they didn't want to stop in Mexico and that they're headed to the United States. And first of all, I guess I just want your reaction to that aspect of it. What do you think about them turning down the opportunity to be well provided for and maybe start a new life in Mexico?
The members of the caravan claimed that they were seeking asylum. Is that not right?
They're seeking asylum in the United States.
Yeah,
yes.
well, no.
Although 1,700 of them have sought it in Mexico.
Different. Those are two terms that are not necessarily connected. Asylum means one thing, and asylum in the United States means something else. Asylum means we are running for our lives and we need a place where we can be safe. That's what asylum means. And that's why asylum has the quasi-religious overtones that word invokes, and rightfully so. The idea that my life is in danger and I need to go with my family to a place where I will be safe. So what the president of Mexico did, very graciously, I might add, and certainly very illuminatingly, let's just say for American politics, was he basically granted the entire caravan what the caravan said they were seeking in the first place, which is asylum. Now, they turned down asylum. So at any point from this point forward, Scott, they are not looking for asylum. They are looking for real estate. They're not looking for asylum because asylum has been offered to them. Now it's about which real estate they would like to walk into and settle based on their personal desires and whims.
Now, I can see how that argument could be made, but Bill, there's a big difference between the United States and Mexico when it comes to safety. I mean, Mexico has become known north of the border as the place where you go spelunking for human heads.
No. That's like saying if they wanted to seek asylum in the United States and we put them in Chicago, it wouldn't be asylum.
Well, I could agree with that.
Okay, so what I'm saying is when they are admitted to the United States, that doesn't mean that they automatically have to live in downtown Baltimore or St. Louis or Chicago or anything. Once they're in the United States, presumably, they can live wherever they want to. And the asylum that was offered by the president of Mexico did not say you can stay in Mexico so long as you keep yourself within the high murder zone areas. So there are places in Mexico without question that are extremely deadly and extremely dangerous. And there are also places in Mexico where people with an awful lot of money go every single year to relax and sit on the beach. So once the president of Mexico says, I am granting you asylum, I am granting you what you seek, they have no moral authority beyond that point.
You know, this raises a question for me, and maybe this is too far afield from this issue, but I think it's relevant. It has always mystified me how people who are advocates of free markets and who would advocate the passage of goods and services freely. In fact, the president himself, President Trump, is calling for bilateral trade agreements that create a more free atmosphere of trade. We conservatives who believe in those kind of free market principles, nevertheless, say no when it comes to the free passage of labor back and forth across borders.
That's not true. That's not true. We're not objecting to the free passage of labor across the borders. We're objecting to the illegal passage of labor across the borders.
Yes, we say that, and I agree.
Well, we could say it if we...
Well, no, I think that's
Scott,
the official...
There's a difference between importing goods from a country and smuggling in something that is illegal. Those are two different activities. And you can say with a great... I can say with a great deal of confidence that it's not the immigration that's the problem. It's the illegality of it. We talked about this in the previous episode. Is there the rule of law in America? Yes or no? Do we have rules in this country? Yes or no? Are there borders? Yes or no? Let me know what the answer is. I used to think I knew the answer, but I don't anymore.
So are you maintaining that the average Republican would say, if the law said unlimited numbers of Mexicans or Hondurans can come into the United States as long as they go through the legal proceedings, that there would be no opposition to that? And I challenge you on that, if you would say that. Because I think
Scotty, that's a logical fallacy. That's like asking me which would win, the irresistible force or the immovable object. The existence of an irresistible force means there is no immovable object. That's the definition of an irresistible force. It's a false comparison.
I think you're not getting my question.
When you say that, don't I think people would object if a law was passed that said we should allow unlimited immigration into the United States? Don't I think that would raise some hackles? I'm going to stop you right there, because there's nobody would approve of that law. There's nobody that would approve of the law. You can't catch somebody as in a hypocritical situation. Well, you said you obey the law, and when you come up with a hypothetical law that is absolutely untenable, it's just not. I'm not going to play that game.
I would contend that the average American has no idea what the quota is for Mexicans coming into this country, but Republicans, by and large, have proclaimed that they are hurting the job market for Americans who are trying to find jobs, that they're driving down wages. But they don't even know how many people are allowed into the country. So the question becomes is, why do we say, well, there's whatever number it is that are coming into the country, we don't want anymore. And at the same time, we say we're all in favor of legal immigration.
Well, Scott, when you have a question like this, you can often come to some sort of sense of what an answer might look like if you grant all of the possible ranges of possibility. So let's just do that. One case is we do not allow a single person into America from this point forward. Can we agree that logically there are two extremes on this spectrum? And much like birth and conception, can we not agree that one extreme of the immigration issue, the farthest extreme you can go, is that we are no longer allowing anyone into this country? That's one line on the immigration spectrum. And the other line on the immigration spectrum is we are letting everybody into this country. There are your two parameters. There's nothing outside of that argument. That's within those parameters the argument lives. So, am I in favor of not allowing anybody into this country? I'm not. I don't think that's a good idea at all. I think America's built on immigration, legal immigration. Does that mean that I automatically want everybody to be allowed in this country? I don't want that either. And so what you find is somewhere between nobody and everybody is a number, and that number can be up for debate, but it's a number. And so to say that the whole idea of a number is somehow either hypocritical or fanciful is just nuts.
I don't think there is a number up for debate, though, and that's my contention. It's like my complaint about when I was active with the Tea Party groups a few years back, when people would say, well, they want limited government and lower taxes. And I'd say, how limited? How much lower? Nobody has any idea what that actual number is. So what is the reasonable number of immigrants to allow in from Mexico? And I think the rhetoric you're hearing from the right when it comes to jobs basically says those people, and let's put aside all the stuff about MS-13 and dangerous people and terrorists hiding out in the Caravan.
Right. I agree.
Forget all that stuff.
That.
Yeah.
Yep.
Just focus on the
for
issue
the sake of the for the moral and philosophical argument.
Yeah.
Right,
for the free flow of labor, which is part of the recipe of growth. That I think that most Republicans would be hard pressed to give you any kind of a number on that, because they really believe that every person who comes across that southern border has the potential to take an American job, and therefore it's not that they're going to say we should shut down that border, but when they say we should just have legal immigration, they really don't want much of it.
Well, there's a lot to be said there. If you asked me how many PhD immigrants I'd be willing to take into the country, I would say all of them. All of them. If you ask me what the limit on PhD educated people in terms of the number of immigrants with PhD degrees, how many would I be willing to let into the United States? I would let all of them in. All of them. And I don't care what color they are. I don't care what country they come from. If you have a doctorate in something and you want to come to America, if you're asking me philosophically and morally, I would say let every single one of them in. So now we're on to what the issue really is. If we had an absolute free market economy and no social safety net whatsoever, You could essentially say we can have open borders because there's only going to be enough people coming into the country to do the job. And when those jobs are filled, there's not going to be jobs for anybody else. And so they're starved to death. And so they'll go back home. But that's not what happens here. We know it. The issue is a complicated issue. But one of the things that complicates the issue is the fact that the people who have been by quota, there are quotas and there are targets and so on, that for the last 25 or 30 years, the targets have been aimed at people who, generally speaking, are coming from countries that are third world countries and do not possess the skill set necessary to thrive in an information age economy, which means that now we're talking about I'm going to have to work harder to pay for somebody else's coming to the country and so on. Now, this is a complicated issue and it's a minefield, so let's be clear about this. Something has changed from, let's say, 1900, and that's absolutely true. What's changed since 1900 is the nature of the economy. When somebody got off a boat in 1900 and they only spoke Italian, they could get a job in a factory and make a living wage for themselves and their family. I'm not putting factory workers down in the slightest way. I have the highest regard for people that work with their hands. But on an assembly line, you can teach virtually anybody in 1900 how to do the job specifically for that point of the assembly line. And so you can take people with zero education, essentially, and essentially even zero English skills. And in 1900, during the peak of the industrial era, these people can find employment and they can find success. Their children will be educated here. And that old line, I think it was Booker T. Washington, I ought to know because I think he's one of the greatest Americans who ever lived. But the whole idea that, okay, I'm going to be a farmer so that my son can be a mechanic so that his son can be a doctor. That's how it works. Now, in 2017, we don't have a situation where somebody coming off the boat with zero English skills and essentially zero education. We do not have an economy that can take large numbers of those kind of immigrants. And it may not seem fair to anybody and they may not like it, and I'm sorry about that. But the fact of the matter is, if you are going to determine that I looked at the top 10 countries, immigration countries, over the last 50 or 60 years, every decade, 1960, 70, 80, and so on. And I'm doing this from memory, but if I remember correctly, in 1960, of the countries, the top 10 countries that were sending immigrants, that we were receiving as immigrants, 9 out of the top 10 were first world countries. And I checked it for the last time I looked at this number, and 9 out of the 10 were third world countries. Canada, I think, was 10th, the bottom. And Canada was the only country, as of now, that we are accepting immigrants from, and we're accepting them from all over the place, but the top 10 admissions by country, 9 out of the top 10 were third world countries. Now, there's a reason for this, and the reason is Democrats. Because if you are bringing in immigrants who cannot function without government assistance, they come into the country as dependent on the government. And if they come in dependent on the government, you got a pretty good idea of which way they're going to vote. Which is why I said at the beginning, you're a racist, you're a xenophobe. No, I'm not. I would take every black PhD recipient or whatever you want to call it. I would take every doctor in the world. I'd take every one of them. I would take every single one of them who wanted to come here. Everyone. I don't care what color they are. I don't care.
You raise the fundamental issue. I think that anytime the debate about immigration comes up, it gets to the social service safety net. Are you saying then that if we had no social service safety net for immigrants, or there was some sort of hiatus, a period of time where once you came into the country, you had to wait before you could be part of the social safety net, that you would not do what you seem to be suggesting you want to do, which is you're picking winners and losers by saying, I'll take the PhDs, but not the ditch diggers. Would you at that point, if there was no social safety net, basically say, look, capitalism works because labor flows to where it's needed. If it's needed here, let it flow?
As I said earlier, if there was no social safety net, the number of immigrants would select themselves by their skill sets. If we had completely open borders, but no hiding, no living with relatives, we're talking about philosophical models now, so we can tell where our moral core is. We can tell what is the moral answer? What's the right answer? So imagine a world where anybody can walk into the United States and anybody can walk right out, but they don't get a single bit of government help and they don't get to hide and get off the grid. In a world like that, where we were dealing strictly with the economics of it, You could have as many immigrants come into this country as you want to because they would fill the jobs that were needed. And when those jobs were filled, there would be no more jobs and people would be starving in America and they would leave to find work someplace else. Now, we're not going to let immigrants starve in America, and we shouldn't. I'm not saying, hey, screw them, let them starve on the streets. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is, Scott, two things. Give us your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free is not part of the United States Constitution. It's part of a poem. And I'm proud of that poem, and I'm proud of the Statue of Liberty, and I'm proud of America being a refuge for the teeming refuge of seething refuge of their teeming shores. But the left interprets the Statue of Liberty plaque to read, "Give me only your poor and huddled masses yearning to breathe free." That's what they've turned it into. Give us only your poor huddled masses yearning to breathe free. And that's not what it says. And that's not what it's about. But if you look at the countries that are now the top 10 immigration countries into the United States, what you find is, give us only your poor huddled masses yearning to breathe free. I don't think that's fair. And I don't think it's good for the country. And I don't see any moral superiority in a person who is poor as opposed to somebody who has worked for their own entire lives to improve themselves and the fate of their families. I can't tell you that, gee, it's not fair. No, it's not fair. People get dealt different hands. You come into the world where you come into the world. Life deals you 5 cards, and those are your cards. You can't change that, and there's no way to change it. You can't change where people are born in the world. In a country like America, our primary virtue is that in this country, it is easier to play your hand than it is anywhere else in the world. In America, it's easier to take a crummy hand, ditch the worst cards, pull in better cards, ditch those, pull in better cards, and improve your hand. And this is the only kind of justice that we can achieve because we aren't born into equal circumstances. And it's never happened, and it never will. It's like talking about building what would New York City look like if people could fly. Well, it looked very different. But let's not waste any time with that because people can't fly. So why are we wasting time with it? We have a world where people are born into poverty. We have a world where people are born into absolute affluence. And that is the way the world is constructed. So my criteria for American is twofold. Skills are important, yes. Education is important, yes. But even when I was saying that, that's not what I was saying. That's not what I'm looking for when I say I'll take every PhD you've got. Because it's not about the intelligence, it's not about the education. It's about the discipline, and it's about the willingness to work hard, and it's about the willingness to play by the rules. These qualities are what made this country what it is. And these qualities are not unique to Europe. They're not unique to anybody. Anybody who comes to America who's ready to work hard, play by the rules, and do what they can to better themselves, I think we should allow here. But this is not what we're seeing. This is not what we're seeing. I live in Los Angeles. I want to say this as clearly as I can. I know a lot of Mexican people. It's not, I have a friend who's Mexican. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is I interact with Mexicans all the time in this country, Mexicans and Mexican Americans. I find them to be, as a group, generally the kindest, the friendliest, and the hardest working people I've ever met. And that's my personal experience with it. But you can't just say only these people are worthy of coming in because they're disadvantaged. It's not based on that. It should be based on, look, Scotty, I'll tell you, it just flew into my head. The history of this country prior to the loosening of the immigration borders and the whole idea of no borders and no walls. Prior to that happening, the requirement for becoming an American was pretty simple, and that requirement was, how bad do you want it? Right? How bad do you want it? And when I say how bad do you want it, I'm talking about the millions and millions and millions of legal immigrants like my wife and people who have had to spend thousands and thousands of dollars and wait years and years and go and sit in front of a bureaucrat who's going to tell you whether your life can stay married or not, or whether you've got the entire world in his hand. And this is playing by the rules. And there are people now who are just as poor as the people in this caravan who have taken every dime that they've worked for and saved for, and they've paid immigration attorneys in their countries, and they filed the papers, and they've done what they need to do, and they're standing in line and telling these people, you can stay there, you've done everything exactly right, you've done everything precisely correctly, but screw you, you weren't smart enough to cheat along with the rest of the people. And I think of those people when I think about immigration. Those are the people that I think about when I think about immigration are the Americans who were born overseas, who are flying through the darkness towards home, who are doing everything the way that this country asked them to do it because it's the method of success, and they're being stiffed and they're being turned into chumps because they're playing by the rules.
Well, whatever you think of the motives or the prospects or the threat of this Honduran migrant caravan, what it does here 5 days a week at BillWhittle.com is it gives us an opportunity to elucidate first principles, to think about what it is we actually believe. And one of the things that our members really appreciate about these daily broadcasts is the fact that they can engage thoughts that are deeper than you get in your little soundbite news programs, that you can actually try to play this out and think it through.
You can chew on them a little bit.
Yes, absolutely. So these kind of conversations are made possible only by the $9.95 a month contributions from members at BillWhittle.com who make it possible for a lot of other people to watch this for free. If you'd like to become one of the producer class, as we call them, feel free to join these ordinary citizens who are willing to put out some of their hard-earned money at BillWhittle.com. There's a subscribe link there.
Best people I ever met, and the best people you ever met too, Scotty.
Absolutely. We are grateful to those people. So for Bill Whittle, I'm Scott Ott. Thanks to those members at BillWhittle.com for making this possible.
That was a great segment. But that was a great segment. I love it when we strip away all of the specifics and get down to the morality of it. Somebody once asked me, you're in favor of cutting taxes. I said, yes. And they said, well, what is the ideal tax rate? I thought, now that's a hell of a question. You could say that the ideal tax rate is the Laffer curve, the one that generates the most revenue, but we are not here to generate revenue for the federal government. That's not our purpose. And I thought about this and I thought, well, what is a definition of the reasonable tax rate? And I said, the reasonable tax rate is the amount of money it would take, divided by the population equally, the amount of money it would take to perform the constitutional duties of the federal government using your money as wisely as possible and with spending and fraud to a minimum. That's what the tax rate is.